Welcome to this video from the Consultants Development Institute. If you've already seen any of the videos in this series, then I ask your patience as I repeat some information now that you've already heard. For some viewers, this might be their first video. I'm Priscilla Watson, and I'm presenting Grasping the Big Picture in Organizations. It's extremely important for consultants, whether they're specialists or generalists, to fully comprehend the workings of their client's area that they're trying to improve. That's true when improving systems such as organizations, projects, programs, and others. Consultants also should have at least a basic understanding of the areas around the problem, so that the results of their consulting do not inadvertently damage other areas of the organization, or that their successes are not somehow soon ruined by the workings of other areas. In this video, we'll describe the basic parts of any system. You can clearly see and use those parts to carefully analyze the system of your client's problem area, and also the systems around it. We'll include several examples of how to do a systems analysis in much the same way that you'd work with your clients. Then we'll add to your understanding of organizations by explaining the features that make them unique. For example, the strategic direction, personality, leadership, and developmental stages of organizations. That understanding will be very useful to you as you work with your clients to quickly understand where the real problems lie and where you should focus your efforts to solve those problems. When working with your clients to improve systems in their organization, you'll need your knowledge from all of the previous CDI courses. You'll need to remain a professional consultant with clear professional goals, roles, and ethics. You'll also need your strong knowledge about yourself, your style, and biases, and how you effectively work with others. Many people prefer to focus primarily on the people side of organizations, that is, on the feelings and interactions among people. Others prefer to focus primarily on the business side, for example, on strategies and structures. When working with organizations, it's important to focus on both sides of the organization. They're all part of one big system. If your preference is for the people side, then discussions in this video about topics such as systems and alignment of systems might not seem as rich as talking about the development of people. Try to remember that the activities that are talked about in this video are all planned, developed, and operated by people. Be assured that you don't have to be an expert about systems in organizations. The most important part of applying the guidelines from this video is the ongoing rich discussions that you have with your client about the internal workings of their organization. You'll need all of your people skills for that. The topics discussed in this video are about the world that your organizational clients live in. They commonly talk about practices such as strategic planning, revenue development, and advertising. This video will acquaint you with those terms and where they fit in the organization. It will also acquaint you even more with the world of your clients to increase your understanding and your credibility in talking with them. Be sure to download all of the handouts for this video. I'll refer to each of them as we go through the video. Before you can successfully improve an organization, a team, or a certain process for the long term, you need to fully understand it. Many consultants focus on only one small part of the organization. That's fine, as long as they can understand the effects of their changes on the other parts of the organization. For example, problems in revenue can have many causes, some of which are not directly involved with finances, such as poor product development or poor employee performance. Problems in marketing can have many causes, some of which are not directly related to marketing. For example, poor market research or poor efforts in sales. Fortunately, there have been recent major breakthroughs in helping people to closely examine and understand systems, including the systems in and around organizations. As a result, we have come to view organizations from a new perspective, a systems perspective. That perspective helps people to see the recurring big picture in organizations, how the parts in the organization fit together, and how they affect each other. That's all extremely important for consultants to see and to work with when helping clients to change. It's knowing where to focus to make the biggest difference in a system or recurring cycle. A systems perspective helps you to do that. Today, consultants and leaders can more fully understand the various parts and processes within and around any system. They can see in particular the ongoing feedback, evaluation, and learning that are needed for optimum performance of the system. That understanding is not only about parts and processes within the system, but also about the overall system and its external environment. That is called an open systems perspective. From this perspective, effective consultants and leaders examine problems not just by focusing on what appear to be separate parts, but on the larger recurring patterns of interactions within those parts. They focus on structures that provoke behaviors that determine events, rather than by reacting to events as was done in the past. They maintain perspective on performance by focusing on the outcomes that the organization wants to achieve, especially in its external environment. By knowing the recurring parts of the system that you're trying to improve, you can do a powerful analysis to identify where best to focus your efforts. You can do that by working backwards toward the cycles in the system to examine each part in the system and its relationship with the other parts. We'll do an example of that kind of analysis later on in this video. Before you can do a systems analysis, you must first understand what a system truly is. Simply put, a system is an integrated collection of parts that are integrated to accomplish an overall goal. The system has various inputs which go through certain processes to produce certain outputs. Together they accomplish the overall desired goal for the system. For example, a car is a system, but a pile of sand or a group of people standing around is not a system. A very healthy system constantly shares feedback between its parts, evaluates that feedback, and learns from it. It's constantly making changes to more effectively achieve its goal. A system is often made up of smaller systems or subsystems. For example, a car is made up of an electrical system and a mechanical system. Organizations are made up of many subsystems, such as products, services, programs, groups, and individuals. Each system has inputs that are processed to deliver certain outputs that are needed by other systems. If one part of any system is changed, the nature of the overall system is changed. That's extremely important for consultants to realize. A highly functioning system continually exchanges feedback among its various parts to ensure that they remain closely aligned and focused on achieving the overall goal of the system. If any of the parts or activities in the system seem weakened or misaligned, a healthy system makes necessary adjustments to more effectively achieve its goals. Consequently, a system is highly systematic. Let's look more closely at the parts of a system. Please refer to the course handout entitled Open System of an Organization. That's called a logic model of a system. After we go through the parts, we'll show you how to use them to examine a sample problem in an organization. Let's look at the inputs part of a system now. Inputs are items that are used by the various processes in the system to achieve the overall goal of the system. General types of inputs include people, money, equipment, facilities, supplies, people's ideas, and people's time. Inputs can also be major forces that influence the organization and its products and services. For example, various laws and regulations influence how the product or service is provided. Inputs are often identified with the cost to obtain and use them. Simply put, a financial budget is a listing of the system's inputs and the cost to obtain and use the inputs, along with any monies expected to be earned or raised from the system's outputs. Processes are the recurring activities that manipulate the inputs to produce the outputs needed to achieve the system's goal. The most important processes are those that recur, for example, ongoing products and programs. The recurring processes used by a school might be recruitment of students, pre-testing, training, post-testing, and certification of students. Processes might also include the ongoing operating functions, such as marketing, staffing, and financial management. Find the inputs and processes on your handout, Open System of an Organization. Let's look at some more parts of systems now. The outputs of a system are the tangible results produced by the system and are often described by using numbers. For example, the number of students who finished a certain educational program. Outputs are often mistaken to indicate the success of an organization or of one of its products or services. For example, educators might assume that a program must have been quite successful because it graduated or trained a large number of students. However, that is not always a valid assumption. The success of that program should be measured by how much the students actually learned, not by how many got trained. That leads us to looking at the next part of the system, the outcomes. Outcomes are the ultimate results that the system wants to accomplish. Ideally, they're in terms of benefit to the people that the system serves, that is, to its customers. Those benefits might be quantified into specific goals. For example, a finance department, which is a system, might establish a goal to train 50 employees outside of the department to manage their own budgets. A nonprofit program, which is somewhat like a for-profit service, might establish a goal to help 10 families become self-sufficient. Find the outputs and outcomes in the handout, Open System of an Organization. In addition to inputs, outputs, and outcomes, a very healthy system constantly shares feedback among its parts, ideally with the parts of the system that most directly interact with that system. For an organization, feedback comes from a variety of sources. For example, from external stakeholders such as customers, community leaders, and investors. It comes from board members, the chief executive officer, and other employees. Feedback can also come from evaluations of the organization, such as its products, services, and personnel. This ongoing feedback is absolutely critical to the success of the organization. An organization has to include ongoing feedback within the organization and with its environment. A healthy system should always be evaluating that feedback. Feedback is useless unless it directly addresses the system and what can be done to improve it. For example, is it useful identifying improvements that are needed to the processes in the system? Is the feedback useful in determining how well the system is achieving its goals or not? Finally, a very healthy system is always learning from feedback, including what should be retained, removed, modified, or added in order to more effectively achieve its goals. Healthy systems are constantly learning. In organizations, learning occurs within people and ideally within groups, processes, and the organization itself. It is often the result of the assessment and evaluation of the feedback in and around the organization. Learning is critical because it ensures that the organization is continually improving its understanding of itself and its environment. It's useful to understand the concept of a closed system. A closed system does not share ongoing feedback with systems outside of its own boundaries. For example, a leader might be a closed system. He does not seek feedback from others and does not share feedback with others. As a result, the organization operates at the very high risk of having obsolete goals and of becoming entrenched in only one way of operating. Closed systems rarely thrive as much as open systems. Find the feedback, evaluations, and learning along the bottom of your handout, Open System of an Organization. Now that we've looked at the parts of any system, let's use them to analyze a system, much like you would do as a consultant. We'll assume that you've done the contracting phase with your client. Now you'll be working with a project team during the discovery phase. With the project team, first draw a logic model of the system of the executive team, including its inputs, processes, outputs, and outcomes. This course includes a handout with guidelines to do a logic model. Don't worry about getting your model to be perfect for now. As you go through the system, you will refine your model. Success in any system is determined by the quality of the outcomes to its users. So start by examining the quality of the executive team's outcomes. In our example, you might ask your client, what is the team to produce and who uses those results? How did they determine that the team was not useful to them? What did they want from the team instead? Answers to questions like that will also point to the outputs that the executive team is to produce. For example, various reports and recommendations and a certain number and frequency of meetings. Does it seem reasonable that the team could produce high-quality outcomes from those outputs? Continue to back up through the system to look at its processes. Here you might compare the processes to what you've read as best practices for the processes in working teams. For example, best practices might include that working teams should always have a clearly stated purpose, that there should be clear leadership roles, that teams should have members with expertise to achieve that purpose, and that there should be processes to make decisions and solve problems. If the executive team was trying hard to do the best practices for processes in work teams, then look at the inputs to the system. Did the team members have sufficient resources to be a high-quality team? For example, were they given a budget to work from? Were they given permission to attend meetings? Now that you've reviewed the parts of the system, consider the quality of the feedback between team members and the users of the results of the team. Was that feedback sufficient and useful? Is it planned to be ongoing? Were team members considering that feedback, and if so, what were they learning? For example, did they already detect that others were not happy with the results of the executive team? Did team members try to make adjustments to improve their performance? You'd use the rest of the discovery phase of consulting to share your findings and recommendations, and we use the rest of the consulting phases to solve your client's problem with the executive team. There are many benefits of a systems view to consultants and leaders. First, there's more effective problem solving. Without clear understanding of the big picture of an organization, consultants and leaders tend to focus only on the behaviors and events associated with problems, rather than on the systems and structures that cause the problems to occur in the first place. There's more effective leadership. The most important responsibilities of a leader are to set direction and to influence others to follow that direction. It is difficult to establish direction for an organization and to keep that organization on its course if you do not understand how the organization works in the first place. There's much better communication. One of the most important ingredients for the success of any system is ongoing feedback or communication among all the parts of the organization. Without a clear understanding of the parts of an organization or project and how they relate to each other, it is difficult to know what to communicate and to whom. There's also better planning. The planning process includes identifying desired results, what outputs are needed to achieve those results, what processes will produce those outputs, and what inputs are required to conduct those processes in the system. A systems view often makes the planning process much more clear and orderly to planners. There's higher quality products, programs, and services. An advantage for designers who have a systems view is that they have stronger knowledge of the primary parts of their project, product, or service, and how they should be aligned to more effectively reach desired goals. The last benefit is better organizational results. The most successful organizations have parts that are all highly focused and aligned on the most important outcomes and goals, those that have been verified by customers outside of the organization. An open systems perspective on organizations can accomplish that. Let's look at another example of doing a systems analysis, this time of an entire organization. You'll use another one of the handouts from this course now, either How to Diagnose For-Profit Organizations or How to Diagnose Nonprofit Organizations. We'll assume that you've been called in to improve the performance of the overall organization because the outcomes of the organization were somehow not acceptable. You and your client's project team would start by examining the quality of the outcomes and outputs of your client's organization. Then you'd back up through the system, including looking at the processes. Since the specific outputs and outcomes of an organization are highly dependent on the nature of the organization's mission and products and services, we haven't specified those in the table in your handout. We'll just assume for now that you have examined the specific outcomes and outputs. I want to use this example to show you how to diagnose the process component of an organizational system, especially where to focus your efforts to make the most successful and long-term change. Many people, especially those who prefer to focus on the people side of organizations, also prefer not to look at what is sometimes referred to as the business side. As we learned in a previous CDI course, Understanding Yourself as a Consultant, a good organizational consultant should be comfortable looking at both sides. In this example, let's make the business side more understandable. Take a few minutes now to look at the table on page 2 of the handout, the table about the overview of functions and their relationships. Notice the functions listed down the middle of the page? Those are typical business functions that occur in the process part of a typical organizational system, whether for-profit or non-profit. The functions are organized into 4 types of activities as listed on the left-hand column, including planning, developing, operating, and evaluating. As the handout explains, when problems occur in organizations, they're usually noticed in the functions in the operating activities listed further down in the table. For example, in the functions of product delivery, advertising, and finances. However, those are often just symptoms of larger issues that are caused farther up the table, as in activities of developing and planning. As you did in the previous example of the executive team, use an organizational assessment tool to compare the quality of the business functions with the best practices for those functions. That's easier than you might think. The free management library listed in CDI's Learning Management System has many such assessments that you might use. When you look at the results of that assessment to see what functions need attention, focus your solutions first on the functions that are listed near the top of the table in the planning and developing activities. If those are not done well, then the operating and evaluating activities won't be done well either. Your handout provides much more information about each of the functions and how they are integrated with each other. That handout is also a great way to get more comfortable with business functions. There are numerous ways to analyze an organization. It is not enough merely to brainstorm a lot of ideas for change and then discuss each with your client. Your approach should be comprehensive and systematic, and should include what information to collect, how to organize and analyze the information, and how to make judgments about it. Diagnostic models provide that kind of comprehensive and systematic guidance. There are numerous such models, for example, business re-engineering, McKinsey 7S, and strategic management, which is probably the most popular. A logic model is not necessarily a diagnostic model because it does not suggest how to judge the information that you collect and organize. It's good to use some set of best practices, especially to compare the activities in the process part of the system. The discovery phase of the collaborative consulting process is where you do a lot of analysis with your client using a diagnostic model. CDI's program, Organizational Consulting, gives more guidelines for systematically going through the discovery phase. The most useful activities in this video and in the complete discovery phase are the continual discussions that you are having with your client about what you are seeing in the organization and what should be done about it. Now is a good time to pause and reflect on what you've heard. In your learning journal, answer the following questions. What are the inputs, recurring processes, and outputs of a system that you're currently working on with your client? Draft a basic logic model for that system. If you currently don't have a client, then do a logic model of your own consulting practice. How are ongoing feedback, evaluations, and learning occurring in that system? Are they high quality? Pause the video and give this some thought. Perhaps discuss these questions with peers, and then write your answers in your journal. In an organization, the functions should be closely integrated and aligned to achieve the overall goals of the organization. Many business functions should be aligned together. For example, the outputs of organizational evaluations should be inputs to the board's deliberations and to strategic planning. The outputs of strategic planning should be inputs to business planning. The outputs of business planning and program planning should be inputs to marketing, and so on. Your handout, How to Diagnose For-Profit Organizations, or How to Diagnose Nonprofit Organizations, describes how various functions are to be integrated with other functions for the success of the organization. You can use logic models to form a chain of outputs and inputs between parts of the system. You don't have to do it perfectly, just get started for now, and refine the chain as you go along. Always work with your client to identify directly integrated systems. Your client knows at least as much as you do about which activities are directly related to other activities in their organization. The discussion around the alignment is at least as important as the activities of the logic models. In your discussion, address the following questions. What other systems provide direct input to the problem area? Perhaps your handout will be useful here. What other systems use the direct outputs from the problem area? Now develop a logic model for the problem area. If the consulting project's schedule permits, do a logic model for each system directly integrated with the problem area. Again, follow the guidelines in step 1 through 4. Now discuss the quality of the inputs and outputs. For example, are any inputs of a function being impaired by poor outputs from another function? The integration and alignment between systems and organizations is usually not in the complete and orderly sequence shown in your handout. Use of the logic model for aligning systems is useful as a frame of reference during the extremely important discussions with your client about which systems are directly connected. Now that you can recognize the parts of any system, let's talk about what makes each system unique. It's those unique features that distinguish the special considerations you must make when working to improve a system. We'll begin by looking at the system's overall purpose or mission. All systems have a mission, whether it's to grow and flourish or just to remain alive. The mission might be implicitly known or explicitly stated. However, for social systems such as organizations, teams, and individuals to be highly effective, leaders need to be sure that there's a clearly known mission that all participants have a strong understanding of and ownership in. Hopefully, leaders have involved participants in the system when developing the mission. As a consultant, you should know the mission of your client's organization or the subsystem that you're working with, for example, a project or team. Everything that you do with that system should be focused on working toward the mission. The social system should have a clear and explicit vision that depicts some future state towards which the system is working. The vision could include the future state of the users of the system, including how they are benefiting from it. Like the mission, the vision gives clarity of focus and can also be highly inspiring and motivating. As a consultant, you should also keep the vision in mind to embellish your understanding of it and what your efforts should be in reference to it. It's also very helpful if the social system has a clear and explicit set of values or overall and ongoing priorities in its operations and interactions with people. All systems have values. However, it's best if those values are explicitly stated and deeply integrated into the workings of the system. As a consultant, your behavior should be in accordance with the values of your client's organization. The mission, vision, and values are usually developed during the process of strategic planning. The strategic planning process affects every aspect of your client's organization. The goals determine the priorities and expertise needed on the board of directors and among the executives and other levels of management. The goals also determine the organization's products, programs, and services. The goals influence what projects and teams are formed to help achieve those goals. That's why strategic planning is so important to the design, development, and alignment of the organizational system. As an organizational consultant, you should understand your client's strategic plan, and your work should be aligned with the priorities in that plan. The plan explains a lot about how your client's organization is designed and why it operates the way that it does. It might be that your work ends up suggesting changes to the plan, especially if your work suggests changes to the organizational system and to important parts in it. If you want to understand more about strategic planning, including how to facilitate the process, consider CDI's program, Facilitating Strategic Planning. There are programs focused on nonprofit and for-profit organizations. The driving force or the engine in a system is the leadership in the organization. That's why it's critical to have the strong support of leadership when consulting to make a significant change in an organization. There are many sources of leadership in an organization. They could include the oversight provided by board members and executives, or by middle managers and entry-level supervisors. Leadership can be shown by everyone in an organization when they undertake the initiative to set the direction for something and then to ensure that the direction is being followed. Leadership is sometimes mistakenly thought of as the leading of other individuals. However, the most common focus or domain of leading is leading oneself, for example, using assertiveness, confidence, and time and stress management. Other domains of leading include leading and guiding other individuals, for example, directing work and delegating. Leading groups, for example, facilitation and meeting management. Leading organizations, for example, strategic management and organizational performance management. Notice that the activities of leading are different in each of these domains. The domain of leadership that you'll need depends on the focus of your project. There are also many different styles of leadership, ranging from highly autocratic and directive to highly egalitarian and participatory. There are also numerous theories of leadership that suggest which style is best to use. Research suggests that the most suitable form of leadership for long-lasting and significant change is a highly participatory form, which tends to cultivate the most understanding, participation, and commitment of others. The bottom line is that systems will not function well unless there is leadership to establish the necessary parts of the system to ensure they are all working well together, with sufficient feedback, evaluations, and learning. The nature of how consulting is done in an organization depends to a great extent on the culture of the organization. Culture is the personality of a system, and it influences what its people perceive, how they make assumptions, what they believe, and how they act. Culture can have a huge effect on the success of an effort for change. Culture is evidenced by a variety of indicators, such as behaviors, traditions, and rituals, ways people make decisions and solve problems, the clothes they wear, and how they influence each other. Organizational change is largely a matter of cultural change. For this reason, it is important for you to understand the culture of your client's organization. However, as an organizational consultant, you can rarely change your client's culture. Often only your client can do that. Changing culture often takes 6 months to several years. One way to get a clearer understanding of the concept of organizational culture is to consider several disparate types of cultures. There are as many types of organizational cultures as there are personalities in human beings. Business professor Jeffrey Sonnenfeld identifies the following 4 major types of cultures. In the academy culture, employees are highly skilled and tend to stay in the organization while working their way up the ranks. The organization provides a stable environment in which employees can develop and exercise their skills. Examples are universities, hospitals, and large corporations. In the baseball team culture, employees are free agents who have highly prized skills. They are in high demand and can rather easily get jobs elsewhere. This type of culture exists in fast-paced, high-risk organizations such as investment banking and advertising. In the club culture, the most important requirement for employees is to fit into the group. Usually, employees start at the bottom and stay with the organization. The organization promotes from within and highly values seniority. Examples are the military and large law firms. In the fortress culture, employees do not know if they'll be laid off or not. These organizations often undergo massive reorganizations. There are many opportunities for those with timely, specialized skills. Some examples might be savings and loans and also large car companies. The previous CDI course, Building Trust, Commitment, and Collaboration with Clients, gave guidelines about how to ensure that your consulting always suits the culture of your client's organization. Organizations, products, programs, and teams all go through different life cycles just like people do. Each stage in the cycle has different characteristics. It's very important for you to know the stages and their characteristics and the current stage of the system that you're working with. That helps you and your client to know what to do to evolve the system to the next stage. For example, people go through an infancy stage that is characterized by lots of rapid growth. Infants often do whatever it takes just to stay alive, such as eating and sleeping. As toddlers, they might make impulsive, highly reactive decisions based on whatever is going on around them at the moment. Startup organizations can be like this. Often, founders of the organization and its members have to do whatever is necessary just to stay in business. Leaders make highly reactive, seat-of-the-pants decisions. They fear taking the time to slow down and do planning. During the teenage years, people go through a rapid growth phase physically, emotionally, and mentally. Many times, this phase is characterized by turmoil and conflict as people try to deal with the rapid changes and expectations in and around them. Organizations in a growth stage are very similar. Demand for products, programs, and services can dramatically increase, causing confusion, conflict, and turnover as people struggle to determine and establish the best roles for themselves in the system. As people continue to mature, they begin to understand more about the world and themselves. They develop a certain kind of wisdom that sees them through their challenges in life and work. They learn to plan and to use a certain amount of discipline to carry through on those plans. They learn to manage themselves. To survive well into the future, organizations must also be able to do this. Experienced leaders have learned to recognize the particular life cycle that an organization, product, or service is going through. These leaders understand the types of problems faced during a particular life cycle. That understanding gives them a sense of perspective and helps them to decide how to respond to decisions and problems in the workplace. If a system does not evolve through the stages, then it can stagnate. Not only is there little growth, but there's increasing chaos and conflict. Or the system might die altogether. Many times, clients that ask for help from consultants are experiencing problems from not successfully evolving through the life stages. That's why it's so important for consultants to understand life stages and how to evolve through them. This course includes a handout that describes one view of life cycles and the characteristics of each stage. Now's a good time to pause again and reflect on what you've heard. In your learning journal, answer the following question. What are 2 to 3 business practices that you most need to learn or most want to learn? For example, strategic planning, business planning, human resources, or advertising. You can very quickly grasp the big picture of each of those practices by reviewing your handout, Systems View of Various Business Functions. There's also a handout with a systems view of nonprofit functions. Pause the video and give this some thought. Perhaps discuss these questions with peers and then write your answers in your journal. If you ever have any questions or want to share feedback during the series, simply send us an email at info@consultantsdevelopmentinstitute.org. And again, thank you so much for your time during this video.